some key takeaways for today is, again, connecting this community to the tourism assets and resources that exist. So some of that is at the state level with the Washington Tourism Alliance, as well as we've got the Department of Commerce represented here today. But also there's many of you are running DMOs at the regional level as well. And we want to make sure that those people who are here today and even those who aren't are aware of what those resources are. We'd like to discuss some of the possible paths that this region could take. Again, this is your tourism, this is your communities that you're sharing with the world. There are plenty of different ways that you can do that. And I know a lot of you have a lot of experience with that already, but we'll be discussing some of those. And then I think, again, you all live and breathe this, and you could quickly rattle off a list of all the most amazing and incredible assets that you think you have there. But I think it's also it's a little bit cathartic, but also beneficial to do that as a group, especially today we're with this slightly larger region than just the 2 counties. And then finally, we all know that there are challenges. We just faced a global pandemic and we're still in it. And there are a lot of challenges to achieving our vision. And so what are some of those gaps that need to be filled? And specifically for this workshop, how can Washington Tourism Alliance support your region in filling those gaps? And what can we do statewide that could also further that vision? So I keep talking about region. And so last year, the Washington Tourism Alliance worked with many of you who are here already to determine what are the regions of the state that shared some geographic similarities, share some assets, some elements of culture, and to some extent would work well together to be able to overcome some of those challenges that we'll discuss. And so your region is what's referred to as the Salish Sea. And so that refers, of course, to the water body that you all have on your western edge. But of course, there's so much more than just the water in this region, from mountains to agricultural areas to lots of beautiful landmarks and cultural aspects, including a couple of small towns and even a city in there. So that's a bit about the regions. We'll have plenty of time to discuss that later on. I do want to do a land acknowledgement since we are discussing a geographic part of the state. And I personally live in Seattle in the traditional Duwamish territory. You all live in different places. And so we, of course, want to acknowledge the fact that our regions are all on traditional indigenous land, and those people are still here, and hopefully some of them are here with us today in this call. But I would like to acknowledge that I'm fortunate to be living in traditional Duwamish territory here where I live in Seattle, and feel free to acknowledge yourself. So in terms of acknowledgement, thank you so much for being here. And again, I think a key part of what we're trying to do today is really understand who is this community and who is out there. So this is one of those rare moments in a large group activity where I would love everybody to say something. And hopefully we only have the afternoon here, so please don't say everything. But consider saying who you are. If you're representing a company or a destination or just a concerned citizen, say a bit about that. So Mike, do you want to just start, maybe since you might see the whole grid, I'll turn it over to you to
okay, I'll just go right down the line. We'll start with Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana Thibodeau. I am the Director of Operations for the Washington Tourism Alliance. I've been working with Dan and Mike for quite a few years now. Yeah, happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Drew Schmidt.
I'm Drew Schmidt with I own San Juan Cruises up in Bellingham. We do whale watching out in the San Juan Islands, dinner cruises, beer tasting cruises, wine tasting cruises, all kinds of cruises.
Great, thanks, Drew. David Blanford.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you. Great to see you all here with us today. I'm Dave Blanford. I'm Executive Director of the Washington Tourism Alliance, and looking forward to having a great conversation.
You'll have to forgive me because this is just what I see. Darlap.
I'm Darla with the Port of Skagit, and I am at the marina down here in lovely Laconia. And we have pretty thriving boating tourists and RVers. And so I'm just here to see if there's any takeaways for me to better build that customer base.
Thank you, Darla. Dana Weber.
I'm Dana Weber. I'm the president of the Bellingham-Whatcom County Lodging Association. And my day job, I'm the general manager of the Best Western Plus by Bellingham Airport in Foxhall.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. Sandy Ward.
Sandy Ward, Bellingham-Whatcom County Tourism. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Chris Rosselli.
I'm Chris Roselli. I'm the Director of Community Relations with Western Washington University in Bellingham. Western's the third largest university in the state with about 15,000 students. Also one of the largest employers in Northwest Washington as well. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Andy Meyer.
Yes, thanks. Andy Mayer with the Mount Vernon Chamber of Commerce and well, also part of the tourism promotion area that will be or is forming a DMO.
Thanks, Andy. Amy Guerra.
Hi, thanks. I'm Amy Guerra. I'm also with Bellingham-Whatcom County Tourism as Marketing Director.
Welcome, Amy. Donna Ramey.
Hi, Donna Ramey with the Blaine Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Program and Events Coordinator, and I also manage the Blaine Welcome Center.
Great, thank you. Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Carter. I'm the Executive Director of the Laconia Chamber of Commerce.
All right. Lynn Longan.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Longan. I'm with the Department of Commerce, and I manage all of our small business programs, as well as staffing the Washington Tourism Marketing Authority.
Thanks, Lynn. All right. Michael McFarland.
Yes, I'm Director of Whatcom County Parks and Recreation, and I'm here representing Whatcom County.
Thanks, Michael. Annette Pitts.
Hi guys, I'm Annette Pitts, Executive Director of the Cascade Loop National Scenic Byway.
Thanks for that. Anya Milton.
Hi everyone, I'm Anya Milton, the Executive Director of the Ferndale Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here supporting Bellingham-Whatcom Tourism in our tiny little corner of Ferndale.
Thank you. Rebecca Boonstra.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Boonstra. I'm the Executive Director of the Mount Baker Chamber of Commerce in Maple Falls, Washington.
Thanks, Rebecca. Christian Martin.
Hi there, my name is Christian Martin. I'm a Marketing and Communications Manager at North Cascades Institute, which is a nonprofit environmental education organization, reaches 10,000 people a year, and we operate the North Cascades Environmental Learning Center on Diablo Lake in North Cascades National Park.
Great. Danielle from Birch Bay Chamber.
Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Gahn at the Birch Bay Chamber of Commerce. I'm currently the interim executive director there. Thanks for having us.
Great. Let's see. Guy Ochiograsso. Grosso.
Guy Ochiograsso, President and CEO of the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Great. Teresa Taylor.
Good afternoon. I'm Teresa Taylor. I'm the project manager for the Office of Economic Policy for the Lummi Indian Business Council. And thank you for your land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Teresa. Happy you're here. Now, people have moved around a little bit as I've gone through this. So if I've missed anybody, feel free to speak up now. All right, back to you, Dan.
Excellent. Wow, what a great group. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to share a bit about just who needs to be at the table based upon where we've seen successful destination development programs elsewhere. And it's just really exciting to see that we're already hitting a lot of those targets already. and just really appreciate you all wanting to show up and participate. One thing I didn't acknowledge at the beginning is that, yes, on the one hand, I do have some content that I'm excited to share with you. And of course, we've got some other partners on this call that are going to share a bit about who they are and what they do. But a big part of this and what would definitely be happening if we were able to do this in person is the opportunity for you all to talk to each other and to build upon some of those ideas and content. So there will be some small group breakout sections throughout where you get to meet each other if you don't already know people and get to have some discussion. So I just wanted to say that because when you look at a timeline of all afternoon and you hear one person speaking a lot at the beginning, and people start to realize that they I mean, thankfully with the virtual, you can just walk away and we wouldn't even know it. But if you're in a room trapped at a workshop, you'd have to like fake an injury or something like that. So it's a little bit easier to duck out if you had to, but we really don't want you to. And I want you to know that your participation is going to be really important for this process. And this is just step one. This is the beginning of what we think is going to be a lot of great work happening in your region. So on the idea of regions and statewide and all those things, I'd like to bring David Blanford, who is the Executive Director of the Washington Tourism Alliance, back on to just say a bit about what Washington Tourism Alliance is up to. And I think Mike is also going to jump in after him and just kind of set the stage for this inaugural workshop that you all are participating in. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you and then to Mike.
Hey, thanks, Dan. It's great to be with all of you today. It's great to see some past board members, some current board members. It's great to be back in business with Dan as well. Worked with many of you over the years to promote tourism and to forge a footprint for the Washington Tourism Alliance to really resume the important task of destination marketing and beyond. I am a Washingtonian. I grew up in Snohomish County. Part of my growing up in Birch Bay. Spent a lot of time in the Salish Sea area. I've spent many years working for Visit Seattle, where I really cut my tourism teeth. But in the process of doing that work, I did quite a bit of work with the Old State Tourism Conference. Actually had a contract for a while to run press trips around the state, including many in Salish Sea area. So I know and love the state well, and I'm so excited to be working with the team here to try and really bring tourism back and tourism marketing back. We are coming up on a luminous date here, an anniversary. It has been a decade in spring since the Old State Tourism Office was closed by the legislature. And you all know, if you've been around this industry for a while, that immediately set in motion a statewide advocacy initiative. And it was great to see so many elements of the state come together to launch an effort that we thought would not take that long to bring back statewide tourism marketing. It turned out to be 7 years, and I was so proud of the group that came together, including many of you here on this call, to stick with it for so long and persevere, and we sure did. It was 2018 when the governor finally signed our enabling legislation, created a path for private and public sector funding that would reestablish statewide tourism marketing. Not a lot, a little to begin with, but we got the foot in the door, and it really was a start. I'm really proud of Mike Moe and Diana Thibodeau, especially over the past year to year and a half period. They go back farther than that, and we thank them for keeping us on track, but especially over the last year to year and a half to really begin putting the building blocks of tourism in place. We got quite a ways down the road from the governor signing the legislation and assembled quite a few projects and programs. Everything on the marketing side, from beginning to rebuild the website, adding more photos and videos, keeping the visitor guide going, lots of direct consumer marketing, even beginning to rebrand the state. And we're about halfway through that program now. I know many of you were part of our stakeholder program. So we made, I think, quite a bit of progress. achieved quite a bit of momentum, and then kaboom, COVID, which has affected all of us. But we've made the decision to continue on. We're not going to stop. We're not going to turn the lights out. We've learned, I think, in all these years of some pretty heavy headwinds that we need to keep on going. And so we have those programs continue. We're even in the market now for a director of marketing and collecting resumes. And so we're excited to be building our staff and go forward. In our mission, of course, we say that the WTA is your state tourism office. We are here to market the whole destination, and we want that business that comes from that to trickle down to all regions of the state, all industry segments. But we also say in that mission segment that we are here to advocate for the industry. And the founders of WTA, the industry leaders, all said that that would remain important. We learned our lesson from all those years of advocacy. There's no going back. This industry is always going to have to advocate for itself. That's partly why WTA is here. And we're a 501c6, which broadens the rules for us to do some of that. So we will. I think, as Mike Moe will tell you, then the need for advocacy is even greater than it was then. The need for destination development, so key, destination management, looking at all of those building blocks of tourism, absolutely essential in order to get to the marketing. And so that, I think, lays the groundwork for what we're trying to do here. Really excited to start this effort off with all of you. And with that, I will turn it over to others. Mike, do I go to you first, or do we go to Lynn?
I just wanted to add a little bit more about destination development. Support for the economic development of rural areas is one of the central tenets to the Washington Tourism Alliance. It's in our enabling legislation, and so we're just really excited to kick off this destination development program. It's been years in the making, as you've heard. And an important thing to know as we go through this workshop, and Dan referenced it, this is only the beginning. Today's event is really about bringing you all together, taking a look at where your region is, where the tourism assets are, and you have so many of them, and then looking at some of the common challenges that you might face and talk about what's possible. To be clear, we're not here to tell you what to do. You guys are all the leaders and the experts of your region. But over the past decade, you haven't had a state tourism office to support your efforts. And so in that time, state tourism offices have evolved. It's not just about heads and beds, though that's still certainly important, but it's about taking a holistic view of the industry in the state and then trying to support it the best way we can. And so we want to help our regions continue to build their identities and then help them build experiences and stories that they can share with their visitors. And then it'll be our job to support those stories at the state level. And that support could come in form of educational workshops, grant program, tourism studios, regional visioning, and of course, destination marketing. So like I said, we're very excited to be here and to see, where this conversation takes us. Back to you, Dan.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike and David. And then like to also bring in at the state level, we've got the Department of Commerce that has been supporting tourism in many aspects. And Lynn had brought up recently that there isn't a specific track within commerce for tourism, but the reality is so many of our businesses that support tourism aren't tourism specific and exclusively, and it's really important that commerce is at the table and that you all are aware of who is working on your behalf at the state level. So we wanted to give a bit of time for Lynn to jump in here and share a bit about what she's working on specifically and just ways that her work connects you all to the state initiatives.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so I appreciate the time. I won't take up a lot of it. I'm anxious for you all to get to work on, defining where you're going in your region and as far as tourism. But I did want to give a couple little updates on kind of some of our small business programs, and hopefully if you haven't been aware of them, to make you aware of what some of the stuff that we have to offer those businesses. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to have tourism, you need to have some really strong local businesses that are a part of that. And so anyway, I think that our small business programs are relevant. First of all, I want to tell you this COVID has been excruciating, as you all know, to all of our businesses. And I'm really pleased that the governor signed on Friday a bill that provides $150 million of business grant money for maintaining operations and another $90 million of grant funding for those businesses that had to close specifically because of his order in November. And so it's money to help them reopen. So that's $240 million. And I'm also hearing that OFM is also coming up with another 60 million, I believe it is, for grant programs. So we have a team of people that are really diving in right now, trying to figure out how to implement these funds. We've already done over 100 million before the first of the year, but we want to really take our time and make sure that it's getting to the right people, and we're not just in too big of a hurry for it. So look for those to probably start getting implemented in late March is what we're assuming. And then I'll tell you a little bit about our small business programs, which everything that I'm talking about can be found on mystartup365.com. That website also will have the link to any grant programs that are put forward for small businesses. MyStartup365.com is a website that's full of online resources, how-tos, tutorials, interactive tools, not just for current businesses, but for prospective businesses. One of the things that we got recently during the COVID that we just introduced last fall is the Entrepreneur Academy. It's 11 courses that teach the fundamentals to first timers through video, workbooks, assignments, quizzes. It's available 24/7. We're getting great response already from people, sending us emails saying, this was really great, couldn't sleep, found this, I'm ready to build a business plan. What's next? So that's really good that entrepreneurship is alive. There's also another tool called SizeUp, which is a sophisticated planning and analysis tool that you can run endless business scenarios on it for your specific county, or like say you're in Mount Vernon, like a 30-mile radius around, or you set the diameters. It's interactive and it's virtual. Scale Up is a hands-on series of trainings. All of them are done over Zoom. We pivoted our programs. I love that word, pivoted our programs when COVID hit and made everything virtual. And so it's a series of classes that help business owners strategically plan and identify new opportunities for growth. And it's not last, I'm just hitting on the highlights, but definitely not least, we have the Thrive program. It provides access to national experts, analytics, and best practices that allow C-suite executives and business owners to address internal and external issues that are impeding growth and expansion. And that's a nice way of saying it, but it really provides a lot of data, direct access to those experts to get your market analysis reports, things that are really specific to your business. It's a one-on-one offering for each business. It's not a group setting. It's just the CEO sitting at a table and saying, this is what our business issues are. And then these experts come back with, here's what we can provide you to move your business forward and to grow. And I think that's it. So
That's amazing.
thanks
Lynn,
again
I
for the
wonder
time.
if you could share some of that for sure in the chat, if there's some of those links, but maybe even send it to Mike, and if he can send a follow-up email, because there was so much rich information there, as well as resources for folks either who are business owners on this in this workshop, or those who work with businesses. It would be really incredible to
Right.
give them access to that.
I'd be happy to do that. The big thing is just to remember mystartup365.com, and I will put that in the chat box. But that website will have will be it's your go-to, or should be the go-to website for businesses. It's where you're going to find those grants. When the grants open, that's where your link's going to be.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you, Lynn. And again, it's great to have that support at the statewide level that helps draw in increased resources, of course, but also helps connect regions throughout the state. If certain parts of the state are hit on something that everyone else needs to know, I think having those folks who represent at the state level is very important. But also important are folks that are at your regional level. And the Salish Sea region is basically two counties. It's Whatcom County and Skagit County. And both counties have had different paths in terms of promoting and developing tourism. And I'd like to start with Sandy Ward, who represents the Bellingham Whatcom County Tourism Bureau, and have Sandy jump in with just an update on where things are at in Whatcom County and what folks either within that county, as well as the folks who are on the call from Skagit, should know about your initiatives. So Sandy, if you can jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And as mentioned before, COVID has really devastated our industry up here in Bellingham and Whatcom County, and it's been particularly rough having the border closed for almost a year now. So with no indication of when it might reopen. So that's put a lot of pressure on Blaine and also the little area of Point Roberts. So some of you probably heard about that. So not to mention all the other tourism providers, restaurants, hotels, small nonprofits. So we're looking forward to working together with everybody on the recovery plan, and especially that $12 million that's in the budget, or we hope will be in the budget, to help with tourism recovery efforts. So thank you all for your support of that. Some of the things that we're doing right now is, because of COVID, it's given us an opportunity to think about how to get more marketing dollars, since we depend a lot on hotel motel taxes, and those funds are going to be down for a long time based on what's been happening with COVID. And so we're in the process of forming a tourism promotion area, which I know Skagit County, Andy, you've been through that. That's been kind of crazy. And we're at the point now where it's going to council. We have the resolution, then the hearing, like 3 hearings, and then the ordinance. So we're looking forward to a Bellingham Whatcom County tourism promotion area by this time next year. We've also been working hard for years on a countywide wayfinding program. This is a $2.8 million program that ties in the Department of Transportation, all the public works, and others. Drew Schmidt had a very big hand in helping us get a wayfinding program developed, along with all the locations and the plan that goes with that. It's on pause at the moment. It's by no means dead, but we're looking for some funding to kind of come back. But we do have a commitment from the county to use some EDI funds. That's economic, what would you call it, Drew? Maybe you can weigh in here. Economic development investment program. Say that again.
Yeah, the Economic Development Investment Program.
Yeah, and that's meant for rural counties. And so we have divided the county into, so we have the Salish Sea region, which is our 2 counties, but our county has been divided into 3 regions, and that is the coastal region, the mountain region, and the farmland region. And so we're looking forward to being able to reconstitute that plan once we are in a recovery mode. We've also been working on attracting a small cruise line, such as American Cruise Lines or the Uncruise company to come to Bellingham and Whatcom County. This would involve the port helping us out and our partners down at the cruise terminals, such as Drew at San Juan Cruises, to see if we could get a small cruise company to come here. They go to Paulsbo, they go to other places, Bremerton, other places in Puget Sound. We'd like to see them include Bellingham and Fairhaven in their itineraries. So we're continuing to work on that. There's a water trails map that's been developed that talks about all the kayak put-ins. And so Todd Ellsworth isn't able to be with us today, but he's been a very big proponent of that, and I know others have as well. So that's on the agenda. We are working with the Maritime Heritage Group on, it's like, it's almost like a scenic byway, but it's along the water, and it includes parts of Skagit and Whatcom County as well. So we're just getting involved in that. We're involved with the Cascade Loop and the Scenic Byways program that the state has resurrected, I guess I would say. It was put on hold when the tourism office was defunded. So we're looking forward to continuing work on that. And then I want to turn a few minutes over to Amy Guerra, who's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing with cultural heritage tourism and a strategic plan we have for that. Amy, would you be willing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sandy. From a marketing perspective, of course, as Lynn noted, small business is incredibly important to destination marketing. So I just started this job in mid-November. If I haven't met you yet, that's why. If I have met you, hello. I think that the organization, as I walked in, was doing an amazing job of communicating with local business and trying to support local as best we can. So we've been tightening up a lot of those partnerships. And one that had already been in existence was the Cultural Heritage Tourism Plan that was started in 2017-ish, I believe, and has been growing recently. I was at an attraction when that began, so I was around for the beginning of it. We brought an expert on cultural heritage tourism, Cheryl Hargrove, back in to do 2 different virtual sessions, and those are recorded if anyone wants to see them later, just to get some new inspiration on economic recovery efforts in combining all of our cultural assets together into one voice and feeling and brand. And I just talked with Cheryl on Friday, as a matter of fact, about tying together a 2-year action plan for harnessing economic recovery out of cultural heritage tourism that will be focused on collaboration, marketing, and enhancement of existing people that are ready to go and have tourists come see us. And then for the rest of my role, we're really working in engagement and taking our relationships with local businesses and the partnerships that have come up for co-support during the pandemic and using that to tell stories that not only benefit the local population, but also become the voice to the broader public. And that has been really rewarding work and will continue to be. And then we will turn that into targeted storytelling when we overlay it with data so that we can attract folks from other regions to come see us in the future.
Thanks. Back to you, Dan.
That's great. Sandy, just a question for you in terms of history. How long has Whatcom County had a county-wide tourism program, destination DMO program?
43 years.
Okay, so there's a bit of history there. And at the other end of the spectrum, let's move on to Skagit County, which has certainly been doing tourism for many more years than that. But I think there's something exciting that is happening about now. And I believe Andy from Mount Vernon Chamber of Commerce, is that right? If you're willing to jump in and just give an update on where things are at in Skagit and how, after hearing what you heard from Sandy and team, how you envision things in Skagit County.
Well, I don't have that much of a report because we're at the beginning of the process in developing the DMO that's going to be funded by the TPA. I'm a little envious that Sandy says she's going to get it done in a year when it took like 14 for us, but so be it. But and I'm not an expert in, not that I haven't been involved in tourism to one extent or another in my whole career with chambers, but still, I've not run a full-scale DMO, so I don't know all the components, but this is a great session to understand what the possibilities are. And I think the main thing is, the first thing we're going to do is hire somebody to run our even the forming of the DMO, and then to take it to implement its full strategy. So I don't have a whole lot more to say. I'm sure Heather can add something. The only thing I would say is that we're really excited about it. The chambers together have done the tourism marketing for the county for quite a number of years through our association, and but we have like $35,000 annually to work with. So I don't know what we're going to get out of the TPA initially because of what COVID has done to the money coming in. But prior to COVID, we were estimating something like $600,000 or $700,000 a year. So it will be significant, certainly by our standards. Thanks.
That's incredible. Nice work. And I know that's a lot of hard work. And what I love about tourism, and what I love about our industry, is that I'm pretty confident that Sandy and all the folks up in Whatcom County are also really excited about this, because it's not a competition between counties, and certainly the fact that we're teaming you guys up as a larger region that the WTA will market and work with. There's so much benefit for having robust DMO in Skagit County as well. And for those of us who, for myself, who go up there very frequently, I'm really into bird watching, for example. It's one of my favorite destinations to go up in the winter time even. It's a great time to be there. I'm just really excited that that story and many more stories are going to have an opportunity to be shared because of this DMO forming. So really good work, Andy, and all the folks in Skagit County who have been working on this. And you mentioned that Heather might want to jump in and just say a few things or just add some input. And I want to open up the space for you, Heather, if you're interested in sharing anything.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I apologize because I have all of a sudden my teenagers decided to vacuum in the other room, which never happens. But anyway, I just kind of want to reiterate what Andy was saying. We're just really excited. Really, LeConner kind of is a sub DMO. Our Chamber of Commerce really focuses 90% on tourism marketing. So we're excited to be able to branch off that and include our whole county into kind of a tourism plan for the future. So go team.
That's excellent. And that's really the whole point in the tourism map, is that you've got various levels of folks that are advocating and promoting and developing within their areas, whether it's a town, a city, a region, and the whole point is that those steps make the entire state stronger, and at the same time having that entity at the state level helps unite folks. But Mike made it clear at the beginning that nobody is coming in to say at the statewide level, you need to do this or you need to do that. These are paths, these are options that you can take, and you may choose to dedicate a portion of what you're doing to tie into a statewide initiative, but then you might have something that you want to keep to your own and have your unique story that you're sharing only locally, for example. So just the fact that we are working at the statewide level does not mean that each of the individual communities necessarily has a roadmap that they have to follow. So thank you everybody for sharing on that. And on the point of moving into the purpose of this workshop, which is what is possible? Why are we getting together as a region? Why are we meeting? Why does the Washington Tourism Alliance want you to participate and add to this conversation? So the first thing is just to have a very brief conversation about this term destination development. And so even though Washington Tourism Alliance is a destination marketing organization, and as David said, there's also many aspects about being able to effectively market. You of course need to have a organized community, an organized ecosystem of tourism professionals and those who care about tourism. So that's the advocacy piece that WTA had to do for its first several years of existence, but as David pointed out, is going to be key to continuing the work that we do in growing. Destination development is a key aspect, and that basically is how you develop the assets that you want to share with the world. I mean, it doesn't have to be people across the world. It could be people from the community down the road. But the development piece is how you put it together, how you choose ahead of time what is meaningful and what's important for you to share and how you want to share it. But at the same time, it's also really important to acknowledge there are certain things that you don't want to happen in your destination. Certain types of tourism maybe you want to avoid. And so planning ahead of time not only gives you the experiences and the products that you want to showcase and tell folks about, it also helps you avoid pitfalls and moving in directions that the community doesn't want to go to. And that's going to depend on the region itself. So what I'd like to do is share 3 different case studies that will from communities that I think have some similarities to your community. That's why I chose them. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go through these 3 case studies. So if you can just kind of quietly on your own take notes and whatever whatever you find interesting from these specific case studies. Specifically, is there any relation to where these communities are to your community? Are there any relations to some of the assets that they have? And in terms of some of the actions that they took to develop, and of course, just like most things, destination development is not you're there, you're done. It's something you're continually doing. But what are some elements from these communities that you might be excited to pursue yourself? So then at the end of this presentation, Mike is going to split you up into smaller groups that you can have a more intimate conversation with and compare notes. And then what we might do is all come back together, and if maybe one person from each of those groups wants to share 1 or 2 things that they were that struck them about that. So again, I'm going to go through these 3 case studies, take some notes or capture ideas that you might have, and then Mike will break you up into smaller groups, and you can have some better discussion about all that. Okay, so the first place I wanted to focus on is also in North America, but it's in a different country, which is Canada, and that would be Saguenay, Quebec. And so in this map here, you can kind of see specifically where this region is. It's near water, it's around water, but it also has a lot of wilderness and outdoor parks and nature experiences, so very similar to the Salish Sea region. And just a closer look at this region, so you can see the St. Lawrence Seaway is a big part of this region as well, and not too far from a major city, which is Quebec City, but so similar in the aspect that that the Seattle-Tacoma region is just to the south of you, but your city, Bellingham, is not a giant city, a megalopolis. Okay, so a bit about this region. So this region, like a lot of rural places, had resource extraction was a big part of their economy for a long time. Forestry, of course, but also aluminum is mined and processed in this region, and then agriculture was a very important part as well. So as you are all familiar with, many of these industries, whether they are due to the resource depleting or due to mechanization, many of them require less people to work in them. And so many of these small communities that had depended upon the jobs in these industries had to think about something else. So the province of Quebec came up with a government program that they called Plan Nord, basically, which would come up with a strategy for how to deal with these industries that were no longer as vibrant and providing the same number of jobs. And they also recognized that one of the key industries that could bolster these regions, especially the rural areas and the smaller towns, is tourism. So then they went in and worked with a lot of the local people and to determine what were many of the assets that draw this part of Quebec and this part of Canada, and to some extent this part of the world. And so many of the key assets were the indigenous and cultural tourism piece, because very rich cultural, that goes back to the beginning of time, of course, and then many cultural resources that have happened since colonization as well. And of course, being Quebec, it's a French-speaking region, and so there's a lot of diverse and unique culture that's associated just being in Quebec that other parts of Canada is interested in learning about. And then, of course, being this wild and remote and beautiful location, tremendous amounts of ecotourism and adventure tourism was available to be developed. And a key aspect with eco and adventure tourism, as well as to some extent cultural tourism, is that just because you have beautiful place to go hiking or birds to go see, doesn't necessarily mean that local people benefit from that. In fact, in some cases, if the resources aren't developed in a way that local people are brought into the conversation, sometimes the things that they used to love to do are now being crowded out by visitors coming in. So these were key aspects of this program, was to not only identify the assets, but figure out ways that local people would benefit from them. So just a few images of this region. I've been to this region a couple times, unfortunately never in a time where the sun was out. So it was kind of like when you visit the Puget Sound region, and you just have to say, well, if it were sunny over there, you would see Mount Baker or you'd see Mount Rainier. It was very similar to that, but I did get a chance to experience the culture and the beauty of it. So what were some of their keys to success? And again, this is an ongoing scenario. They achieved success early on, but there's still obviously work to be done. But a key reason why they were able to achieve success with this program is that they really brought a lot of people to the table. So there were universities present, there were businesses present, there were non-governmental organizations like DMOs and chambers of commerce present, and then just concerned citizens were participating. And by bringing people together, there was partnership and collaboration that came from that. And again, I'm sure that you all have experienced this, and to some extent maybe seen resistance from community because of what I described about how tourism does not necessarily is not always welcomed by local people. You have to get local people involved, and it's an education process in terms of what is possible for tourism. So the community was engaged, brought into community roundtables and workshops and so on. The other aspect, though, and especially when considering attracting tourism from outside of the region, or in this case, the province, is thinking about the infrastructure that must be there for somebody who's coming from further afield. And so actually, by working on those partnerships and that collaboration and the initial province-wide initiative Plan Nord, they were able to bring in resources to develop high-quality infrastructure that was necessary for that level of tourism. And I think this is a really key aspect for any tourism development and destination development, is really thinking about what is unique to the region, to the story. So in this case, we're broadening the circle that we're drawing around to combine Skagit and Whatcom counties. So is there a unique story that that larger region has to, that differentiates from, say, just on the other side of the mountains in the trails and lakes regions, for example? And then focusing on what is distinctive to the attraction and what are the experiences and the products that could be developed or that could be promoted better or improved that are based upon that story. And then, of course, you need to have humans because that's the great thing about tourism. It's still pretty much a human powered industry. And so, and in many cases, that's the humans are the best part of it. And we miss humans now. We would like to see humans in person. And so tourism is going to be even more about humans, I think, and connections going forward. And so, but the people are needed to be able to have the proper training and the proper skills in order to do tourism and to meet, especially in attracting that larger scale audience from outside the region. There are certain skills that need to happen. And for tourism to be beneficial for local communities, you want local people to be able to be in those jobs and have high paying jobs within that industry. So the training, and so I was really happy to see that Western Washington, and I think there are maybe one or two other education folks, the North Cascades Institute, for example, on this workshop. And then the last step, which is I think what a lot of people assume is what the destination, the DMO is all about, and that is promoting and marketing it. But all these other aspects are so important to having that world-class experiences and world-class story to be able to share. So so these are the keys to success for this region in Quebec. Again, it'd be interesting if you found any connections between your region. A little bit old, so I'd like to share a video with you that is from our sister state to the south. And this is several years old now, so but I think it's still really relevant to what you all are working on here. And it's a bit of, Mike kind of alluded to this idea of what could be done in the future in your region to work together collaboratively to grow some of tourism. So here's just an example of a region in Oregon that took destination level development very seriously. So I'll put this on and hopefully you can hear it.
What makes this part of rural Oregon special is, of course, the fact that it is where the forest meets the sea.
The Alsea Bay is where I go to just let everything get washed away.
This is a geographically isolated but wholly abundant and rich place. So the reality is that we live in a small village, and that as much as the local support means a great deal to us and contributes to our bottom line, we do depend on visitors and the revenue that comes with them.
You know, you have to get people to come, because once they're here, I think they fall in love with the place. People they feel like they've discovered something really wonderful here.
The challenges of this area, like many rural areas, are the economy and the shift from resource extraction economy to something that's sustainable for the future.
I think it's challenging and scary to ask a community who their elders were successful in these areas and those are no longer viable for the youth. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is that transition point.
I think tourism has always been here to some extent. It's more accessible now. People might have come here and had no idea, they sit in their motel room and they look at the ocean and that's fun, but then what? And maybe they do a little shopping, but then what? And there's a whole lot to do around here.
Part of the rural tourism process was to identify our local assets. The two specific projects that we focused on was the Oregon Coast Gravel Epic, which was a brand new event. And the other big project was the Hike Bike Paddle Map, which was all the non-motorized trails of South Lincoln County.
When we started working on the map, we already had a large number of trails. But what we didn't have was a place where all these trails were pulled together. And so developing the map did that. We were able to identify people from many different agencies and experiences to contribute to it. We had people who knew the cycling side of it. We knew the water trail side of it. We invited them, we listened to them, and were able to put together something that reflected a rich source of information.
We get a lot of people who come in, maybe they don't want to kayak, but they want to hike or bike. And it's been challenging in the past to say, well, let me get a piece of paper and you can give them directions to all these different places. Now we just pull out one product and open it up and we can highlight based on their needs and our knowledge of those trails.
You're in an absolutely beautiful area, nice little community here. Really appreciate their support, and the course is going to be a blast.
My name's Steve Cash. We're in Walport, Oregon, and this is the Oregon Coast Gravel Epic. The inaugural Oregon Coast Gravel Epic was in 2013. We had about 75 participants. There were two courses, a 76-mile long course we called the Abomination, and a 35-mile short course we called the Son of Abomination. You're not coming for an easy event, you're coming for a challenging event. Our discussions with the city and the business community were, what can we do working with you to put on a very good cycling event that'll draw people to Walports and will want them to come back and will give us a venue to put on a challenging gravel-based cycling event. Cycling events in the coastal range are just one more use of great roads that are there. Nature was a wonderful partner. The old growth forest, the scenery, the steep climbs up into the woods and looking back over your shoulder and seeing the ocean.
From surveys that we did after the races, that about 75% stayed in the area, and so that involves, hotels, restaurants, all the rest.
The second year it grew by 100%, and it's going to continue to grow. And I think what we're going to have is something that's going to be a nationally recognized, unique event on the Oregon coast. We're building events for cyclists, but we're building events that cyclists see communities that they want to come back to.
I think nature-based tourism was really important for this area because that's what we've got.
The lasting impact of the Rural Tourism Studio is that in addition to the fact that we produced a product, it raised an awareness of the importance of making visible the attractions of the area.
My advice to any community that's thinking about doing this would be to go through the visioning process with your hearts open. I think you'd be surprised at what'll come out of it.
Okay, so couple things. First of all, we were also not paid by Travel Oregon to play that video, but I would hope that after seeing it, actually, I wouldn't mind going anywhere, but after seeing that, we all want to go to Travel Oregon. But that said, whereas we were not sponsored by them, Washington Tourism Alliance has, again, benefited from our partnership with our region to the south, to our state to the south. And you might think to yourself, well, why would they want to support Washington Tourism Alliance becoming formed? And aren't we competitors? Aren't we fighting over the same guests? To some extent, sure, but this is what's beautiful about tourism, is that the travelers don't often see that there's a barrier necessarily between regions, between states even. And so by having a robust tourism development and robust tourism marketing program in Washington State, it actually benefits Travel Oregon. So they supported us throughout the advocacy period, speaking at our conferences and presenting paths that we could take to try and get our funding. And additionally, now, especially now that we are in this place where we're able to invest in tourism development, they're also very excited to share some of their models that they have created and not just done on the Oregon coast as this demonstrates, but all throughout the state. They've had numerous tourism studio programs throughout the state. Interestingly, one of them is on the gorge, and again, rather than say, well, we're just going to build up the Oregon side of the gorge and forget about Washington, they actually got a grant from the Forest Service to include the Washington side. This was when WTA was still trying to get funding. And so again, this is this idea of tourism destinations working together because they see that it's important. So again, thanks to Travel Oregon for producing that inspiring video. Hopefully you found that interesting as well. Let me just, where are we? Okay, so what we'd like to do is have you now get a chance to break into smaller groups, get to know each other a little bit better, and to just see, was there anything that resonated in those 3 different case studies? Anything that you found that relates to your community, any of the ideas that were brought up, any seeds planted that you would like to capture? Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to demonstrate or to give directions on how to do this. But in terms of where we are in terms of timing, we have about half an hour before our scheduled break. So I think maybe if we can, let's just go for 15 minutes, just because I don't want to put you off into some random digital room. And then if it's terrible, you feel like it was torture. So let's go for 15 minutes where you get a chance to talk to each other and compare notes, and then we'll come back and meet as a larger group and to see if there's any ideas that bubbled to the surface. Mike,
Great.
can I turn over to you to divide up the group?
Yep, and hopefully this works. I haven't actually done this before, but just make a note of these questions. How does your community compare to the communities presented, and then what are you excited to pursue here in the Salish Sea area? So I'm going to create 4 breakout rooms of 4 people each, and it's going to be automatic, so it's going to be kind of random, I think. So we'll just see what happens here. Okay, well, I know you all had probably amazing discussions. Should we kind of jump into some of the communities that maybe you saw yourself in Dan's presentation, and then talk about some of the activities that maybe you're interested in pursuing here in the Salish Sea region. I was in a room with Sandy Ward and Annette Pitts, so I'm going to put Sandy on the spot because she came up with most of the ideas. I think she's been thinking about this for a while.
Some of the stuff that we started to talk about was utilizing some of the assets we already have in an effort to get people, we've talked about road trips, but maybe an effort to get people out of their cars and maybe figuring out a way to do some car-free adventures. And one of the things we looked at is the rail corridor that goes between, has this Eugene, Oregon and Vancouver, BC, but it stops in Mount Vernon and it also stops in Fairhaven. Man, if we could just add a stop in Blaine, we talked about some of the ideas that we could do. You could have a tulip train, and you could have a rails to raspberry train, and you could have an oyster trail train. You could have all kinds of fun stuff utilizing the train corridor that we already have. That was one of the thoughts. And then we also thought about if you could continue the Centennial Trail, which is the biking trail that goes through Snohomish County up to the Skagit County border. Could you continue that all the way up to Vancouver, BC? Maybe not even on the rail, maybe it's a rails to trails thing, but maybe it utilizes some of those other side roads like Chuckanut Drive, where you would need entrepreneurs to create infrastructure along the way like they did in New Zealand with the huts. So you could have, you'd need signage, you could do interpretation, you'd need somebody who rents bikes, who rents rollerblades, who rents horses, who provides water and snacks and coffee and racks and maybe one-way transportation. So you could ride so far and then have somebody pick you up in the van with the bike rack on it and take you back. So we talked about that. Restrooms, you know, dog-friendly stuff. And we also talked about some way to get people out on the water. So a mosquito fleet kind of thing that would connect our communities and maybe go all the way up to Point Blaine, Semiahmoo, and Point Roberts and connect all of our communities together via an electric ferry or catamaran of some sort that would get people out of their cars and onto the water. So those are some of the ideas we had.
We already have decades of things to do now. Dan, are you back?
Can you hear me now?
I can. Whew.
You can. Okay, yeah. I don't know what happened. Once you pulled me out of the small group, all of a sudden my audio stopped working. So anyway, I learned a long time ago, quit, restart. That's usually how you fix most technical things.
Okay, what about some of the other groups? Who would like to jump in?
Anya. I'll jump in. So I'm Anya and I represent the Ferndale Chamber of Commerce. I was in a room with Mount Baker Chamber and Linden Chamber. And there are a couple things that we talked about. Of the 3 case studies, we really felt like the Saguenay, Quebec case study resonated more closely with the Whatcom County area. The Oregon one seemed like that fit closer to Bellingham. And the New Zealand one was like, I would love to just go. But when you look at the Saguenay one, you know, thinking about the industry, the forestry, aluminum, and agriculture, like that seemed to fit closely with what we see in Whatcom County, like the county-wide aspect of things. Also, the tourism assets being the Aboriginal and cultural tourism and eco and adventure tourism, like definitely interested in kind of exploring more of what that looks like. And, you know, ultimately what we talked about was like, Sandy just needs to tell us what we need to do on one end of things. And then, you know, when we're trying to like think of things on our own, you know, like what about tacking on to things like Ski to Sea? Like couldn't Ferndale have a larger part of here's this big event that's bringing in tons of people. How can we support that better? Is there an event that we could do at Hovander Park the same time that all this is going on? Because there are tons of people in that park. And then one of the barriers to that, when we talked about it, one of the barriers is like, you know, the parks requires, they charge you by like the head, like how many people are going to be in the park. So like those are kind of significant barriers to that type of success. And so that's where the collaborations really comes into play. Like, how do we talk about this? How do we build those partnerships? This is all for the greater good. Like, I'm not getting rich on this, but it's for the economic vitality of the region, right? And so how do we continue to do that? We also talked a little bit about like, if it would be really neat if we had like a canoe map that went down the river. Lots of great ideas. And, you know, I would like to see a greater focus on representation of Indigenous culture in Whatcom County. And so I'd love to see what happens if we can, you know, build partnerships and inroads with Lummi and Nooksack in terms of figuring out how to appropriately make destination development way more inclusive.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm furiously taking notes here. Okay, any other group would like to jump in here?
I was pretty impressed with Amy's connection to all 3 of the case studies. I don't know, Amy, if you wanted to share that.
I didn't want to have to follow Sandy and Anya. They were too inspirational, but Well, I think Dana and Andy both in our group brought up specific things from all three case studies, and we all had a different take on it. The Saguenay one, I definitely tied in cultural heritage tourism and a lot of what we're already trying to work toward there, bringing in all the stakeholders to find that shared narrative. And often that shared narrative is something that talks about diversity. So that's that's a complicated issue, but it is a fun one to try to solve. And we're working on that all the time, and it will be ever evolving. I think the who we're bringing in as far as their expectations of how to interact was present in all three of these. And that's what I was saying, the education piece, and Andy was talking about this a little bit too. How do you ensure that it's the right fit of expectation of the traveler, of how they're behaving, and how we work that into the stories. And I think it was actually Dan that sort of summed it up and brought us back around to the example was bird watching from Dana. But are there things that people are doing that they're doing a lot more than we realize, that we're missing out on that storytelling, and could be evolving programs around that and infrastructure in the community around that we're just not aware how popular it is now. See, I said I didn't want to follow Sandy. I will also just do what Sandy does, but it's because she's my boss.
Yes, you do great. Thank you. Danielle, you looked like you're about to say something before.
No, I wasn't, but that's okay. I can go. We talked a little bit about, so I'm Birch Bay, and we had LaConner, and then Teresa was with Lummi, and Chris with Western Washington University. So we talked a little bit about our communities and where we fit into those. And I think we kind of all agreed that the Oregon one was kind of the most similar, although we're between the two larger cities rather than kind of tucked away in the corner. Yeah, I'm sorry. We'd like to see more art. That was one of the things that Teresa mentioned, would be seeing more art here in the community, focusing on Native art for the area, tribal art. What else did I make notes on here? Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's great. Anybody else want to piggyback on what Danielle had to say?
Hi, this is Teresa.
Go ahead, Teresa. No, really, go ahead.
Oh, Chris, sorry. I was just going to mention that Chris had mentioned that we were in between the two largest cities on the West Coast, being Seattle and Vancouver, BC, and that we are a huge in the agriculture community, and we have a very diverse community, and we have a lot of recreation, from hiking trails to biking trails to paddling, a boating community. Go ahead, Chris.
No, that's pretty much it. It's kind of unfair that we threw Danielle in it. She halfway through, she had to help her daughter with schoolwork, so that we threw her under the bus on that one. So
It's okay.
So yeah, I think really was just an understanding of really the unique diversity of our sense of place that we've got here, right? And that we do have incredible outdoor activity, but we also have fishing and ag, really strong ag, plus skiing, plus the ocean. And so because of all of that, it's very different than actually those other three destinations that were offered early on. So, and tied that between two large cities, which is different than those other three examples that were provided, I think was really kind of what shaped our overall conversation.
You know, one thing that hasn't come up yet in this conversation, but it has in previous ones, especially in Skagit Valley, you guys have, I mean, throughout the entire region, you have an amazing agricultural story. And I think in Whatcom, you know, they're starting to tell that story. Sandy was talking about some of the sustainable connections that they're doing up there. But I think in Skagit, I mean, boy, you guys have just an incredible story that, you know, we're still trying to figure out how to tell. And I think, you know, you're going to have this DMO come on, and boy, what a great role that would be to fill, because you just have a huge story that's, you know, waiting to be told there. And I think just utilizing some of the existing infrastructure that you have, it could be very easy to build an amazing agricultural program there.
One other thing I failed to mention that we also had a conversation about was really doing a better job of highlighting our tribal history and cultural heritage here. In that, you know, we have LaConner here with Heather, and they look straight out at the Swinomish Reservation there. And of course, we are very fortunate to have Lummi and Nooksack here as well. So that's something that I think is also unique.
Absolutely. But turn it back over to Dan here.
Not much to turn over because you guys did an amazing job. I was just sitting back learning myself personally and loving to hear just the connections that are being made in each of the smaller groups, and then bringing it to the full group here. I think that one of the challenges I've observed in doing this type of work in the Northwest is that every one of our regions is basically how you all described, where you just have such crazy things mashed all together in one region. So the ability to be in the snow and then in salt water, and then drinking beer that night, and staying at a world-class lodging. I mean, the fact that you can do that in so many places in Washington State, just that, and the culture and the art and the community and just the storytelling is so rich. So how do you actually come up with a story that you think connects and tells the story of your region in a way that is told? The good news is you have plenty of things to choose from, but sometimes choosing can be difficult, and especially when it seems like everybody up in the Northwest can tell a similar story. How do we make ours more unique? And I think that's the next step. It's not what we're doing today in this workshop, but I just love the fact that so many of you touched on just incredible, unique aspects of your region, and it's very compelling. We're going to take, we've got time for a break now. I was going to suggest 15 minutes. So, and people I know are taking breaks when they need to, and perfectly awesome that you're helping kids with school and dog barking and all the other fun stuff that we enjoy from working from home for those of us who are at home. So I'd like to take a 15-minute break. So it's pretty much 2 o'clock now. If we can meet back at 2:15, we've got a little bit more small group work to do. Might end up finishing early, but I'm not here to stall or stunt the conversation, and just excited that we're having it already. Any questions before we go? Okay, so 2:15, if you can meet back here. See you then. Even better.
Hear you.
And Chris, yeah, I saw your note. Yeah, Sean has worked for me on and off the last several years. He's awesome. Super. I mean, he started working for me before he was even 21, I think, and he performed well above his years.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's one of my favorite people for sure. So that makes my heart happy.
Yeah, I wish I could work with him more. He's now moving on to be like more an EMT, and he's a professional guide. I mean, he's gone in so many directions. He's
totally
awesome.
Right
Cool.
on. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for teaching our folks.
Sure, you bet.
Important link here. Okay, Mike, what do you think? Should I jump in?
Go ahead and jump in.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sticking around. I know this is a big commitment, and it's as was brought up earlier, we're just at the beginning of work and fun and exciting times. but it starts right now. And so I appreciate folks being here and being part of this. And the conversations have just been really enriching for me to hear. So that's the best part of my job, is just the continued learning that I get. So the next step in today's workshop is to discuss what it is that you all identify as being your, what we would call assets. So those can be developed assets like existing trails and existing experiences. They could be things that are ready to be developed or you want to develop, and many of those already came up. And I think it's important to identify, and this was brought up by one of you earlier, but I think it's important to identify a bit about what travelers are seeking. So this research was done in 2013, so a bit old now, but I think it is still relevant today. American Express surveyed 2,000 plus US adults, and they discovered that 72% of respondents said that they would rather spend money on experiences than things. And I think that this is going to be even more true as we start moving out of the COVID restrictions and people have had plenty of time to buy things, and they're going to be most excited about getting out and doing them and experiencing them again. And so I think this is really important, just to take into what it is you identify as the assets of the Salish Sea region. So on that note, oops, sorry, there we go. I'd like to break you into small groups again and have you discuss what you think tourism currently looks like in your region. And I would like you to take a step back from pre-pandemic, even though it's been said and it's clear that we're never going back to that point. But I think it would be pretty difficult. The picture that would be painted right now is going to be quite different than what it will be 1, 2, 3 years from now. So thinking more along the lines of what with COVID, but not necessarily right a snapshot at this very moment. What is tourism currently looking like in your region? And then think about some of the assets that your region has. And again, think the whole region, not just the part that you experience or that you live in, but the whole region. And then come up with a couple that you think you'd want to share, and we'll make a list and be able to go back to that. So Mike, I'll have you Zoom people out into some small groups. I think probably like 3 groups this time, maybe. And you did a good job last time. You claimed you've never done it before, but I think it worked out well. You're on mute. Mike, you're on mute.
Okay, 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So again, the 3 things you'll do is first just kind of give a snapshot of what tourism currently looks like. Think about the a handful of your top of mind assets that your region has, and then choose 2 or 3 of those that you'd like to bring to the larger group once we Zoom back together.
Yeah, I'm assigning rooms now here, and hopefully it'll be you'll be with different people this time.
Okay, well, I'd love to hear what people have to say about their breakout. We had a very lively discussion. I learned a lot. And most of those conversations I'm going to leave in the breakout because they're pretty spicy. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so love to hear what folks came up with. So again, just review what we were asking you about. First of all, what does tourism currently look like? And again, I don't necessarily mean right this very second where we're in the middle of kind of a half lockdown situation, but just in terms of what kind of assets are developed already. And then what are some of those assets that you want to identify from the region wide that you think that apply in both counties and in the entire Salish Sea region that you want us to make note of, and perhaps even if it's undeveloped, spend some energy developing it at a future date. Feel free to just unmute and start chatting away. Otherwise, Mike will randomly pick on you, and then you get upset with him.
I was just waiting to see if I was going to have to race Anya, but it looks like I won.
Yay!
My group already decided that they were going to throw me under the bus, so I'm sacrificing myself. We talked about, so we had represented, I'm from Mount Baker. We were talking with Annette from Cascade Loop and Gary from Linden. And we could find a lot of similarities, both pre-pandemic and during pandemic, kind of between the Mount Baker corridor and the Cascade Loop, where you're talking about, more rural communities, more outdoor recreation based travel and that sort of thing. And then, over the past year or so, we're seeing, because playing outside was the only thing we were allowed to do, so many more people are doing that. And we tend to have some of the more, advanced or expert terrain, but we're starting to see more, beginner folks thinking, that they can hike in flip-flops and they'll hand out water and there's bathrooms everywhere. And, that just isn't the case. And not only is it frustrating for the visitors at that point, it's frustrating for the locals and the service providers and the Forest Service and so forth. So we would love to see, and I would love to see more infrastructure put in for more entry level tourism and outdoor recreation. Everybody thinks that they want to hike up high and see a big view, but sometimes people really kind of want to go for a really long walk with not a lot of elevation gain. And so, we'll often send people, out to Birch Bay and Blaine area and that sort of thing, because you can kind of wander and stroll in those places and see pretty views there too. As far as assets, of course, I think the Cascade Loop and Mount Baker are assets. There's no denying that, obviously. But things that people could be encouraged to do is again, is a little bit more entry level of like activities like birding and photography and wildlife viewing and those types of things should be on the list.
Don't forget your idea about the Forestry Service roads.
Oh, well, that's what, yeah. So the U.S. Forest Service has been decommissioning and closing forest roads because they can't afford to keep them up. And it just seems a missed opportunity to not develop some of those, maybe a lowland loop through the forest kind of activity.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the New Zealand example, and a lot of what they were able to do there happened to be because of the federal government land initially. And it's in our situation, we have a much larger country and a much bigger federal government bureaucracy, and it takes a lot of work and time. But on the scale of big picture projects, doing some of that work in federal land could be a huge game changer. And I think that we're moving into an era, especially with the right people advocating, some of those things that maybe were completely off the list of possibilities 20 years ago are starting to become at least possible now. So that great ideas. Excellent.
Question, can you ride bikes? Can you ride gravel bikes? I mean, this is not a mountain biking trail, it's a road, right? So it's graded, it's not steep, Can you ride a gravel bike? Could you do a gravel bike thing like they did in Wildport on decommissioned Forest Service roads? Or can you walk dogs there, or what can you do?
Potentially. Yeah, you could potentially do those things. You can't ride bikes on Forest Service trails, but Forest Service roads, there's some drawback to riding bikes and walking dogs on Forest Service roads that are actually being utilized by vehicles, because it can be pretty sketchy, especially if you've got, somebody who's on their first or second time out, because forest driving is not the same thing as I-5 driving for sure. But yeah, it's absolutely a great observation, Sandy, for sure.
I believe that is actually fueling the growth of gravel riding around the country, is just, Rebecca, what you brought up about a lot of these roads that are being decommissioned for various reasons. I mean, I don't think it's a terrible thing that roads, we don't need people driving everywhere. I think a lot of those roads were set up, many of them, for logging in the first place, and so they're probably extra. And if we can use them for recreation, even better.
So do we have a contact, or who do we work with to see if there's a way we can connect a bunch of those things to make it worthwhile?
This is why we need a U.S. Forest person in our next meeting.
Yeah, well, that's going to be the very next thing we discuss after this section, is what's missing, who's missing specifically. And I know Michael Schlafman used to be, I think he's, if he hasn't been brought up the chain, he is the Mount Baker Snoqualmie person that showed up to a lot of the sessions I did in Snohomish County, and he is one of the few people. It's very, and I say this with respect, it's very difficult. The Forest Service is a very difficult entity to, it's a big ship. It's got a lot of diverse uses going on, and it's hard to get some of these tourism things done. And he's one of the few people that seems to take it on head first. So he would be a good person to make sure he's involved in the future, I would say. That was a long way of saying that, sorry. Okay, who else would like to talk other than me?
I'll go.
Okay, great.
Following Rebecca. So, we really jumped right into, and this was Birch Bay and Skagit County, both Danielle and Heather, and we really jumped into identifying assets. As Danielle and I both recognize that tourism hasn't changed tremendously for COVID for us, other than we shut our doors. And we have like as an example, we have an open vestibule, but people can't come into our visitor center, but we put information out. And there are a few people that are coming in, but it's not terribly, it was never terribly huge to begin with in Ferndale. But when we started talking about assets, Birch Bay talked about the berm and the walking path at the berm and being one of the largest restoration projects. We talked about agritourism in Skagit County, and we talked about some of the older parks like Hovander Homestead Park as well. And those were kind of like our top 3 assets. And one of the things that I brought up was, taking a note from, I noticed when I was traveling in Sweden, they had a really large open air museum, one of the oldest open air museums, which basically was like Hovander Park. And except it was staffed with people dressed in the period from the 1700s. And, like at Hovander Park, it would be the early 1900s. And so it seems like that would be a really neat opportunity to do something. There would be a lot more animals. So like when you think about an underdeveloped opportunity, I think about things like that, where people, there are already families going there, make it a bigger draw. So that's one of the other things that Heather brought up too, was that something unique to notice is that in Skagit County, the tourism is very separated by I-5. And that the west side and the east side look very different. And I think that that's indicative, and as Mike pointed out in our session, that's very similar for the state. And so keeping note of that, and I guess really being able to identify your audience, know your audience, who you're reaching out to.
Heather, do you want to talk more about the water situation too, and how that could be an underutilized asset that you have?
Yeah, well, the Swinomish Channel, which is a wonderful asset, and to be honest, years ago was probably much more utilized from a tourism standpoint. Smelt Derby being an event from the past, so on and so forth. But recently, it's become where it is utilized by privateers using our marina, which is wonderful. But from a public standpoint, if you come to LeConner and you want to access the waterway, there's a real dysfunction there. We don't have any entity of kayak rentals, or if you want to take a tour, of the San Juans or of Deception Pass. Now, sometimes seasonally, we will get boats that come in and do partner up with other companies to do such thing, but it's not something that is a standard process. Like for example, a couple of years ago, we had John Wayne's boat docked in LaConner, and it was a real niche attraction. And then, you know, it lasted a year and it was gone. And so I feel like that is something that we need to develop more in order to obtain a younger audience that's more interested in outdoor adventure activities to that area, for sure.
Really cool. And that's, I mean, as is the case with advanced humans, like you all are advanced humans, you're jumping ahead in where we want the conversation to go, which is eventually determining what are some of these assets that you don't have yet developed, and where are the gaps, and what can WTA, as well as all of us that are engaged here, do to support that development. But I really appreciate that, because that's what's interesting again about tourism. And I think about just our economy, period. We have this perception that every human for themselves, but the reality is, Heather, you just identified that kayak, there's a void for a potential business. How does a business like that start? I mean, maybe there's a local grant to get somebody to help them buy the equipment. Maybe there's statewide training that for outdoor tour operators. And then of course the new Skagit County DMO will market it, but then WTA through maybe there's a waterways of the Salish Sea will be statewide. So, and that's what's so beautiful about conversations like this, is that you just have to plant a seed, and then you all can start running with that. I also really appreciated the statement about the divide between that I-5 forms, and you know, divides like that make me almost want to create something that pushes through that barrier, and that would be an interesting product as well, a way to connect the two. So before we move on, though, I want to make sure, who else haven't we heard from yet? Sandy and Deborah.
Well, I can let somebody else talk.
In unison.
We talked about the birding thing that we could really capitalize on with Birch Bay and Blaine and the Wings Over Water, and then what happens in Skagit County. So making some kind of a bird trail and taking advantage of that. And then the other thing we talked a lot about was attracting the people who share our values, and that might mean people who are in, you know, more into sustainability. So figuring out in the Salish Sea area, including Highway 20 and all of our rural roads of the Mount Baker Highway, where are all the car charging stations? Do we have enough infrastructure? I mean, we know the last gas up the Mount Baker Highway is what, Maple Falls, Rebecca? But, you know, if you're going to make a 100-mile round trip from Maple Falls up to Artist Point and back, you know, do you need a car charge? How do you do that? So identifying where those gaps are so that people could charge their electric cars might be something that we could kind of figure out and make some sort of a trail. And then Deb had something.
Right. We also talked about some kind of curated tours. And as you all have been talking, I'm thinking that maybe we could have it branded something like Sails and Trails of the Salish Sea, but under that would be a menu of various maritime related, water related activities, the birding, the kayaking, throughout 2 or 3 counties here. It wouldn't just have to be Whatcom County. So we talked about some of that as well.
Excellent, great ideas. And again, the beauty here is that some of these things like car charging stations, that's going to be bringing in the State Department of Transportation and probably U.S. Transportation and all those things. And to get that accomplished is by getting your communities together, organizing, and making it happen. And so it starts here, which is wonderful. Who else would like to share? Who haven't we heard from?
I'll just chat really quickly. Diana and Teresa and I had a small group, and Teresa, let me know if I miss anything. But one thing that was mentioned really is that one of our really great assets, of course, is our pretty well established transportation corridor that we've got. So we've got our airport, we've got train, we've got ferries, we've got a variety of things already built in as a part of our infrastructure already. The other component that we talked about, of course, is our shoreline, tide pools, and then, of course, the vast San Juan Islands, which I don't think they're really represented here, but if we're going to talk about Salish Sea, of course, really talk about the San Juans and what that actually means. And then something else we also talked about, we're talking about a variety of different things like a birding trail, and we're talking about biking trails and hiking trails. And of course, we've got this vast history of our tribal heritage in the Coast Salish peoples that have been here since time immemorial. And so, some sort of tribal trail or something that people can actually utilize as a way to also sort of enjoy the history of this place.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's what's so important about identifying what is unique, what can be done nowhere else in the world than in your backyard. And that includes activities, of course, but Chris, like you highlighted, it's not just, you can kayak in New Zealand too, but what's the story in the Salish Sea that maybe has some, maybe there's some similarities to New Zealand, but it's your story, and it's all the folks that live in your area. So beautiful. Anyone else before we move on? This is a great discussion, so I don't want to prematurely stifle it. Okay, very good. So we have one more section left where you do some small group, and as I alluded to, it's already happening. You're already realizing all the amazing things you want to do, and recognize that there will be some barriers ahead of you, and you want to fill those gaps. You want to overcome the barriers, and you want to think about the future and be excited about it. So that's all good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my presentation here. Just give me 1 second. Share screen, Microsoft PowerPoint. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing that now. Play from current slide. Okay, so I think it's helpful to think about some different strategies. And again, the good news about this group is that you've got folks who have been either at the table specifically for tourism in the past, or very competent, intelligent folks who've done other things that will be very useful here. So when I share information, it's not that this is the way to do it. These are just things that I've learned about or I've observed from other folks. And so I think it would be useful. I think a key aspect to destination development is really making sure you have the right proportion of people at the table. And so a good friend of mine, Shannon Stoll, who is the president of or the CEO of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, he was in a workshop that I did in Snohomish County because he used to live there, and he brought up this point about the magic triangle, as he calls it. And so a successful destination has engaged members of the government. So in the conversation we were just having, that's the Forest Service people. That would be the sovereign nations that exist in our region, the tribal governments. That would be state government. That would be city councils as well. But as we know, government can't do things alone. They need other entities to get things done. And so you need your businesses as well, especially in tourism. So much of our businesses are small, micro, family run, individual entrepreneur businesses. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's really how you tap into that unique story. But a lot of times those businesses are the ones that struggle the most, and they don't often know about the resources, and they're often right in the weeds every day. And so in addition to having businesses at the table are the nonprofits. And so those could be the chambers of commerce, who are there to support and incubate and train and advocate for the businesses. There's entities like the Washington Tourism Alliance, the Bellingham Whatcom Tourism Bureau. And I think, you know, Chris, it would be interesting because I think WWU it's a state entity, but you know, I think it almost fits into the nonprofit realm of this triangle, but it's the same idea. You need all those players at the table in order to train and educate the workforce and the community to advocate for the projects and the infrastructure that you want, and then of course just to bring the economic and cultural benefits. What's not seen in this diagram are people. And I think the community is key as well. And in a lot of places where tourism has has seen some opposition, it's because the community wasn't brought in and encouraged to participate in how tourism should happen, and not only how, but just that it is happening and why. So, and another thing that's not really represented here is the media. And I think great destination development is starting to court media from the very beginning, because there's so many amazing stories once you start developing these great ideas that you just came up with. So forming partnerships is key between this magic triangle. So think to yourself, for the group that's here today, where do you see a lot of good representation and who's missing? I'll just throw that out there and see if anyone wants to make the observation.
This is Heather. I have just a funny comment.
Yeah.
So I had several what I consider power players in this conversation on the list and that were invited. And I'm noticing in Skagit County, we're not extremely represented in this meeting today. There's only Andy, myself, and Darla from the marina, really. I noticed that they I got the input that was like, well, Heather, you have the time to go to the meeting. You go take notes and then share it with us. And that tends to be a lot of time, a barrier I come up with in every day, wanting to create conversation or something along those lines. Everyone is, well, yes, everyone is busy, but everyone is extremely kind of, I think, worn out from Zoom. And, you know, again, this is kind of my input. I would like to see, obviously, a lot more power players from Skagit County. So we need to figure out a way to encourage them to really be inspired to take part in it.
Yes. And a key aspect is that not everybody can or should have to make every meeting or workshop. And it's our job of those, I'll put this on my shoulders, is to how can we also be out there meeting those people that need to be involved as well. Just saying, oh, they didn't come, they don't have input is not an excuse that I will be making. So those are really, that's great observation, Heather. And so not only who's not here today, but it would also be useful just to say, who are you not engaging with either? So in your case, you are engaging with many of these players, they just couldn't make this specific meeting, or they just force you to go to everything and you have to do all the hard work.
One thing I didn't mention, mostly because I wanted people to stay on the call, is that we are recording this, and I will make that available. So if there are people that you want to share it with, you're more than welcome to. Sometimes if you tell people, oh, we're recording it, they're, oh, great, I don't have to stay participate. So, but
yeah.
One of the key players,
oh yeah, please go ahead.
one of the key players I see missing from this conversation are businesses. And Mike, would this be the time now to start my mini soapbox? Oh, you're on mute.
I love your soapbox speech. That I stopped her because it wasn't really what we were doing, but I wanted to capture it for our closing remarks. I don't think we're quite there yet.
You cue me up then.
Yeah.
You cue me up. But businesses are missing from this conversation.
Yes. And so for those of you who don't know how I got my start in the tourism business, I used to, my background is as an educator. I used to work at nature parks, and I'm more of a nature guide. And I helped start an adventure travel company that's still going on. I don't own it anymore. And so I was that small business, and I understand why it's hard to show up to things, because it's, especially right now when you're just struggling just to make ends meet, of course, and even to stay alive. But if we don't have that voice here, we're not going to know how to help the businesses. So again, not everybody needs to show up to every meeting, every workshop, every event, but it is really helpful to identify who's missing and do some outreach to that. And I would say I don't think we have very much government, like representatives and people like that who need to know what's going on in order to change rules and laws that might be hindering us, or that can provide the funding for the electric charging stations, or provide the funding to build train infrastructure and whatnot. So, and I would say that we probably are certainly not fully representative of the tribal governments as well. And so, so I think there's a combination of outreach that will be useful. I think this is a new concept of these two counties all of a sudden lumped together and working together. But as I'm hearing from all of you, there's so much shared assets and shared story. And I think it's a logical connection, but it's going to take a little bit of work to work together. Okay, moving on. So just a couple of things, strategies before we move into the final step, which is identifying the gaps and what to fill. But a key aspect to building this destination development is just really tapping the local resources. Who's out there? Who are the trainers? Who are the mentors? Who are the businesses who've been there that would love to take someone under their wing to teach them how to do it? Who are the professors at the university and so on? Harness their knowledge and make it well known that there are people out there to support you. And I think it's really important to keep the enthusiasm level high, especially right now when tourism has taken such a hit, and a disproportionate hit, because some businesses are doing just fine that happen to be located in certain places because that's where the travelers wanted to go. But many businesses have struggled, and even those that have done well have had to deal with a lot of barriers. So keep the enthusiasm level high. Some of the projects you may choose to take on are multi-year, even multi-decade. For sure, don't shy away from those, because the sooner you start, the sooner you finish them. But also think about some quick hits, some quick wins that you can accomplish that will start to build momentum and people get excited about it. And I keep stressing this, but so many communities I've worked in, especially in some of the communities where over-tourism was an issue, is that the community starts getting very not excited about tourism. And that's not a healthy tourism ecosystem when the community doesn't see the benefit of it. So the sooner that you're communicating and I know all of you are already doing that, but just really making sure that that's on the radar from the beginning. I think a big aspect of tourism is this local ownership and this pride. And so knowing that there are jobs for our young people, knowing that there are entrepreneurs that are thriving in tourism, and telling your story to the world is a way to really keep that pride in your community. So that's something that I really think about a lot. So again, just who's not here, let's make sure that we consider doing that outreach, and making sure that people are aware that this process is going on, and we can't be successful without them. So, okay, finally, last activity. Again, thank you for your stamina and your patience, and I know this is not always easy, but for me, the conversations have been super rich, and I've learned a lot. So what is missing, and how can Washington Tourism Alliance help with what is missing? Those are two separate questions, but of course they're related. So we'll do one last breakout. And think about some of the assets that were brought up in the last conversation. Again, you folks are advanced. You're already thinking in this capacity, And then think about break down what is holding you back. You know, well, we can't do it because of funding. Well, why is the funding not there? What do we need to do to get the funding there? We can't do that because of regulation. How do we change the regulation? What's preventing that regulation? And then I think this is going to be really useful for Mike and Diana and WTA is what are some ways that WTA can support you going forward? It doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it, but it will help them evolve this initiative into the most useful way it can be for your region. So again, just same format. We'll break out into our small groups. Any questions or any comments before we move into the smaller groups? Okay, so I think we're ready to take the last final Zoom to the small group. Mike, anything you need to share first?
Nope. Here we go.
Nope. Very good. We'll come back and then we'll do a final debrief. Okay, so the directions were choose the top idea you'd like to share with the group. I'd love it to hear what people have to say.
Deb Granger, I thought you made some great points. Why don't you go ahead and mention what you said?
Okay, Chris, and everybody, we were kind of struggling with this, but basically we all know we have amazing assets to share with our world and with our community, but there needs to be some kind of vehicle or mechanism that supports an entrepreneur or a group coming together, either, you know, that partnership that Dan laid out with the NGOs and the business and the government, somehow some seed money to get people creating these curated experiences. Because I learned very clearly that tourism is not that entity. They are the marketing arm. They help share and tell the story, but they're not developing the story. So I really believe there's a lot of people that would step up if they had, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 sort of seed money to create something and take it from there. Is that what you wanted, Chris?
So yeah, good example. Maybe that's a grant program, for example. It could be a low interest, no interest loan situation through commerce. That could, I mean, so yeah, great ideas.
Yeah, we heard small business incubation in our group.
I like that word, incubation.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
Who else would like to share?
I'll just say what we talked a little bit about the packaging of the various opportunities that are in the communities there. Again, we also had felt there was a need for some type of funding to be able to pull these together. What's lacking in some instances is just getting either a small business or somebody engaged in that interpretation or type of activity to be aware of what's out there and maybe give them some direction, some funding, and then going from there. But definitely on the having some funds available that in fact that could be put forward so that it would pull these some of these groups and these opportunities together and build upon that.
Excellent. I was interesting when you send people off into their separate rooms and they come back and start saying similar things. It means that either it's a really good idea or you're all like telepathically connected and we should be scared of you. Anyone else like to share?
I'll share from our group.
Please.
Rebecca and Heather. And when we were trying to identify some of the barriers, we talked about how we have a lot of siloed organizations. So like having the opportunity to be in groups like this and speak is very insightful and inspirational as well, because we think about things that we hadn't necessarily thought about before. When we thought about the question, what can WTA do to support us and our efforts? We thought, and this also ties in with our top idea, is really to focus on the promotion of rural tourism, because both counties have rural tourism, and what that looks like and how is it visually represented that makes it enticing. Some of our other top ideas are really to deepen and increase and deepen tribal relations and have a more collaborative approach to how we address some of our tourism issues. And then also a push to utilize the underutilized waterways, especially in Skagit County.
Excellent. Mike, you're taking notes, right?
Oh, yeah, I've got pages of them.
I know. Thank you. That's always important to have someone on the team who I can't listen and take notes at the same time. So I really appreciate Mike for you doing that. Really great ideas all around. Who else? I will speak from our group. Danielle brought up something I think is really important, and I've been saying a bit throughout the day this afternoon, is just the importance of communicating what's going on with the community that is not necessarily involved in the tourism sector. And I think this is a really key point, and we had a lively discussion about whether Washington Tourism Alliance would ever find it a success if a lot of local people in Washington even knew about it. And my feeling is that the WTA is working for the industry and working to promote the state outside of the state. So it is less likely that local people would know about it. But I think somehow local people need to know about tourism and need to know how it's benefiting them. And if that's, and then therefore they know who Washington Tourism Alliance is because of that, then that would be success. So Danielle, that was a really good point, and Annette brought that up as well. Okay, anything else? Looks like we're losing some folks. Yeah, bye, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chris.
And
thank you.
We're pretty much on the done side of things, but I'll just bring back my pictures just so you know that I've actually been to your counties. So I think you guys seeing that yet?
Yeah.
From current slide. Closing thoughts. And anyone know where that is? If you knew where that was, then that would be even more amazing. So I just want to open it up to the floor. This is a small enough group that I don't feel like I would be keeping us here until dinner time if I made that statement. It's like, who wants to share closing thoughts?
Anya.
Mike.
Anya, you're up.
Okay, so closing thoughts are really, I think that the most illuminating thing for me in this webinar, if you will, and is the importance of getting and of establishing like a vernacular for my members, for the community, and especially around the idea of how destination development supports the economic vitality and development of rural areas. Like I really educating and driving that home. And when doing that, you create the opportunity for an organic understanding of the importance of that. Because we need that vehicle to get towards recovery. Because when we get to recovery, I really do believe that we are going to be in the roaring 20s for sure. I mean, this is 2021, but in 2026 is going to look a lot different, right? And so in order to get there and bridge that gap, we need to be prepared and get our communities on board with understanding the importance of this. I just was on a call the other day with the Port of Bellingham when we talked about the economic vitality of communities are based on quality of life. and we look for quality of life opportunities. And so when I'm going to be going around and visiting other places, it's going to enrich my life. So what will Ferndale have to offer to enrich someone else's life? That's the way we need to be thinking about this. So I think that the most important thing I heard out of this that I'm going to take away is how destination development truly supports the economic development of rural areas. That's my soapbox.
Good job.
Love it. I'll buy that soap. Who else would like to jump in? I always like to see how long I can go before people get really uncomfortable with the silence. Sounds very fun.
I have something. This is Deb Granger. I know that tomorrow night, Whatcom County and Skagit County, I think, are having an information session, a 1-hour information session about the new Maritime Washington National Heritage Area. And I invite you all to join that. It's free, it's 1 hour. They do a great job of explaining what the heck these NHAs are and the potential. But talk about a vehicle that could help bring this disparate area of our state, which is really not that disparate, it's pretty unified around the water, bringing it together and we have an opportunity to create this and develop this for how we want it to be. So I invite you all to join that, and it's from 5 to 6. If you need an invitation, let me know, we'll send you one. Should be good. There are these information sessions supposedly all throughout the 3,000 coastal miles of this, but this is the first one that we're having up here. So has the potential of bringing us all together.
And I've been sitting in on some of those meetings and working on some of their committees, and I think it's a fantastic, campaign, and there's a lot of potential there for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so now what? Where do we go? We said it at the very beginning, this is just the beginning. Obviously, hundreds of other people that are part of this movement that weren't fortunate enough to spend their entire afternoon with me today, and that's perfectly acceptable. My encouragement to you all moving forward is to really start embracing this idea of the full Salish Sea destination as defined by Washington Tourism Alliance, and thinking about, as you're moving forward with your initiatives, how does what you're moving forward with, how does it relate to the bigger picture of that larger region, and how can you leverage that larger regional destination in ways that the whatever part of the ecosystem you have been working in couldn't do on its own, and then especially how can you leverage the fact that we are fortunate to have the statewide entity now, Washington Tourism Alliance, as well as the resources that Lynn presented from Commerce working on your behalf. So that's my challenge going forward is really thinking through this lens of the region now, and tapping into it and speaking about it in that capacity. And then also the challenge, and it's been brought up by several of you, which I really appreciate, is just thinking about who isn't here and who do we need to have engaged, and how can we engage them in ways that might be more appropriate. Again, not everybody has the time, the ability to sit through a workshop, but that doesn't mean we don't want them to participate. Those are my two closing thoughts. I'd like to give Mike the chance to just wrap up the entire workshop and just talk about things that he's hoping to do in the future and how you'll hear from him next. And while we do that, I'll just make sure you have my contact information. I'd love to get your feedback and your thoughts, especially the fact that this is virtual and the ways we could have done this that more engaging, or any of those ideas or thoughts. But Mike, I'd like to give you the last word.
Thank you. First of all, just thank you all so much. I know this has been 4 hours of your time, and I know you're very busy, but hopefully you found value in this conversation. I definitely have. It's just been awesome having these talks with all of you. But like we said, this is the very beginning. Do know that it is a big state, though. We have 11 of these meetings that we have to that we're going to be doing throughout the state by the end of June, and then we will be working on other ways to move this conversation forward. Dan mentioned the studio tour, or the studios that happen in Oregon, and we talked to people in Colorado and in British Columbia about how they've helped develop these communities. There's lots of great information out there that we will be bringing forward. We will be talking about a grant program, and hopefully in the second half of 2021. A lot of that, again, will depend on what kind of CARES Act funding we get. So if you have a chance to talk to a legislator, tell them to support the tourism funding that is in a couple of the budgets that we're working on. And I mean, it's a lot more money than what we have right now, and it will make this even more robust and give us the chance to do that small business incubation and to really help your communities. So yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome, and there's a lot more to come on this for sure. And Sandy, as a WTA board member and as somebody in this this region, I would like to give you an opportunity also to sum this up a bit.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for participating. And, you mentioned who's missing from this meeting. We invited everybody that we thought should be at this meeting. So we had a pretty long list of people that we hope will stay engaged. A lot of them couldn't be here today, or they couldn't make that commitment of 4 hours. And we do plan to go through a tourism master plan for the future. That would give us a 10 or 20-year look at tourism infrastructure needs that we have. So this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg here, and stay tuned for that. But that isn't something that we would produce for the whole region, but that is something definitely that we want to look at for Whatcom County. And a lot of that depends on when we get our TPA funding. And that's one of the first things we want to do with that money, is to get a countywide strategic tourism plan for the future. So stay tuned for more on that.
I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mike, and Diana for hosting us. And thanks to everyone doing their outreach to get people to show up. And we'll hear from you all again soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.